Welcome to The Imposters. This is a podcast about expertise. Who gets to define it? Who gets recognized as an expert? And whose knowledge is overlooked in humanitarian and development spaces? The Imposters recenters aid around affected communities and lived expertise. In each episode, I speak with refugees, migrants, and Global South practitioners whose expertise is shaped by experience, context, and leadership. These conversations explore what expertise and legitimacy look like in the sector, and how imposter syndrome is often a systemic outcome rather than a personal failure. Each guest joins the Imposters, an archive of lived experience experts in global development. We are a growing network of practitioners committed to elevating lived expertise in humanitarian and development work. I am your host, Lila Raouf. Welcome to the Imposters. Today's conversation is the first part of a two-part episode with Mohammed, a Sudanese humanitarian and human rights practitioner whose work is deeply shaped by lived experience of displacement, resistance, and survival. So in this first episode, we focus on imposter syndrome, not as a personal insecurity, but as something produced by systems of power, colonial knowledge hierarchies, and humanitarian structures that struggle to fully recognize lived experience. Mohamed reflects on displacement, exclusion, and the cost of doing human rights and humanitarian work as a local practitioner, and how imposter feelings often emerge not from lack of experience, but from systems that deny belonging. This conversation may touch on displacement, detention, and structural violence. Please take care while listening. So, Kabe, I'm really excited for this conversation.
Hello, Leila. Nice to be with you, and thank you for the invitation. And actually, from the name of the podcast, is mind blowing, and very exciting, and it tells what is it about. So, thank you, and glad to be with you today. And hopefully, we have a very productive, enlightening conversation.
In this podcast, we are talking about, displacement, detention, structural violence, and your work navigating all of this as a refugee yourself. So, do you ever feel like an imposter in humanitarian or human rights spaces? And if so, where do you think that feeling comes from?
Oh, that's a very good one to ask or to start with. Actually, sometimes in the past 5 or 6 years, I had this feeling when I first started working in Sudan and then in Egypt. I had this feeling, and that came from like I was young and just started working and entered the labor market, and I didn't have the confidence about myself, and I carried with me like a history of um, like low self-esteem feelings similar to imposter syndrome, or like similar to marginalization and oppression. At the beginning I was having this feeling, but over time I came over it through knowledge and educating myself and having around me people who value me and my experience and appreciate what I bring to platforms of humanitarian work and support.
Um, how did your early displacement and the exclusion you talk about shape your understanding of power and belonging, like before this became your formal career?
Um, I mean, to talk about this, I would like to shed light a little bit about examples of the marginalization and discrimination I faced since I was a little child. When I was 11 years old, we used to live in downtown in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan, with my family and a number of many families who are originally from Nuba Mountains in Sudan, and some of them are from Blue Nile State. Very old buildings and people who look different than the other people who are surrounding us, and then we faced a number of discrimination and some sort of racist treatment from people around us. And then because of our place and it is centered in the capital, the police and the Ministry of Urban Planning, they manipulated, and by force we have been taken away from this place. And what happens is that nobody really supported us. Sometimes I can see that, like, really small things taking space in media and public opinion on such things, but our situation didn't get that attention. And of course, some of the organization, because we have been living in very precarious situation when they have destroyed our houses, we're living in tents and we refuse to leave, and was very difficult situation. Nobody gave us help, and that was the beginning for me to feel that we are imposters. We're living in a city center where we don't belong, and we don't deserve to be there. And then there is no support have been provided to us by humanitarian workers or by any other public people, and then made us or made me feel that less human or not equal to other people. And that's a very sad beginning for my feeling. And luckily my family, they were educated, and they tried to talk with us and not to make us feel that we are less than the others or that we are not deserving good treatment. Throughout my time, through university, for example, difficulties becomes the daily life at the university in terms of registration, in terms of exams, and sometimes because, like, due to low financial capabilities, we face problems because of, like, sitting to exams or something like that, and that's all is part of how it shaped my view, being discriminated against by the governmental institutions, and then by the community, and then by education system, and on daily life and daily basis, has shaped the feeling of not belonging. That's not only the city where I used to live and grow up, or like the entire country, made the feeling that it's not my right place, we don't belong here, or we have to be like in places where there is very local, there is no services, where the majority of our people living in very difficult situations and conditions. And that's how it started, the feeling. But as I said, conversations with family and close friends, and actually also close relationships with people who could be considered in the other side, who making us having this feeling. But we have good friends from this population who were good friends to us and very nice, and that started easing the feeling of being imposter and that I don't belong. When I started working in the humanitarian field, I noticed there is structural beliefs or some sort of strategy or policy to keep people who with this experience, or people who are from my ethnicity, for example, to be kept away from decisions and be followers and obeying orders, and their knowledge and experience are not really valued. And I had to put my foot down, per se, and to fight for showing that I am capable, I am responsible, and I am knowledgeable, and I have the experience and the understanding, not better than anyone, but similar to everyone.
Thanks for sharing that. And it sounds like, from how you described some of the marginalization you faced as a child in your upbringing, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this imposter syndrome or this insecurity you felt from marginalization actually inspired you to enter a career in, humanitarian work. Would you agree with that?
To some extent, yes, because I lived experience, and I know how it feels to be powerless and how it feels to be marginalized, and even worse, to have the feeling that you are less than anyone else.
You mentioned that as you kind of transitioned into the humanitarian and human rights work, maybe your lived experience wasn't valued as expertise. And then you specifically said you had to put your foot down. So could you talk about that a little bit more? Um, how were your experiences treated in the beginning?
So at the beginning, at the very beginning, when I started working on that in Sudan, we as people with lived experience, but underdeserved communities or populations, we have always been given orders and instructions to do the work, and we come to spaces where we discuss projects and things, and we just receive information, and we receive trainings on how to do things and without any inputs from us. And that's, sadly, it comes from some of my fellow citizens who are Sudanese, and also from foreigners from Western countries who are managers or who are the supervisors. We do the field work most of the time in difficult conditions, and in the field, I cannot take a decision without getting the consent or the approval from supervisors, which who are, I said before, who are they? And that was really hard because I'm on the ground and I see what is happening, and I'm best in best position to see what it could be best to do. Over time, softly try to ease my way to uplift this view, and because like I thought that if like I have to put my foot down softly, not with aggression or with anger and such. So in forms of chats or in form of conversations with supervisors and such, and delivering point of view and understanding over things, and that has changed a little bit. When I was in Egypt as a refugee, it's more difficult environment to work in any field, not only humanitarian and development fields. Um, Starting from 2013, when I come to Egypt, I have been between Egypt and Sudan for so many times over the years. And all the time I'm in Egypt, I work in restaurants, I work as an office boy for a law firm, and I work sometimes in factories. All of these places, and in the lowest ladder of any kind of job. And then when I had experience in the humanitarian field, it was impossible for me to find a job in Egypt with any of the local NGOs or international NGOs, because as a refugee and as a foreigner, I'm not allowed to work by the law. It's impossible to find a job. Uh, and then I found one of the refugee led organizations in Cairo, Egypt. It's named St. Andrew's Refugee Services. It's part of United Church of Cairo. I started working there, and majority of staff and volunteers are from the refugee and migrant communities. The majority are working in the frontline services, but there were many numbers in different positions, and including Syrian leadership. And that was a good environment to work, where I felt belonging and where I felt appreciated, and my qualifications and my lived experience was valued. And that allowed me also to give more and to gain more confidence, and also to empower others.
Yeah, that's a really important point that you made, that when you feel like your experience and your expertise is being valued, you're able to give more to the organization rather than when you don't feel valued, you feel maybe less inclined, or really you feel like you have nothing to contribute to the organization. You mentioned that while you were working in Sudan, maybe in Egypt as well, I'm not sure, but I know it is like kind of a general critique of international development and humanitarian organizations that the like highest level positions tend to be reserved for foreigners who are coming from like the headquarters of that organization, and then you have your field coordinators and the implementers of the programming tend to be national staff. And it sounds like that's what you experienced in Sudan. Do you think like that stems from maybe colonial logics that shape who is considered trusted, who is protected, or who is promoted within humanitarian systems?
Um, 100%, I would say, yes, it's colonialization legacy, and sadly, it's not only because of foreigners coming from Western countries become the managers or the supervisors who are having the say on how we work. But this system of hierarchy based on color or based on the religion or political affiliation, it happening inside Sudan. So when I say I consider to be at the bottom of the ladder, is because ahead of me there is my fellow Sudanese citizens, but from particular regions or particular ethnicities who are considered to be higher than other Sudanese, and who are the one who
Mm.
also being beneath the foreigner, the national staff and people from Western countries, and that's part of the dynamic that I have witnessed over the years.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important detail and distinction that you're making because I said the word colonial logics and coloniality, and a lot of a lot of people may assume that I'm talking about like white foreigners. Those tend to be the ones who are associated with the legacy of colonialism. Yes, often white foreigners are in these positions, and that can be due to coloniality in the humanitarian sector. But you bring up a good point that there are also hierarchies within the subnational level. As you said, certain ethnicities are considered higher on the ladder than maybe your ethnicity, or by tribe, or by gender, or by class or caste. And often, this stratification of society is the legacy of colonialism. But you bring up a good point that it doesn't necessarily have to be by race or maybe a different nationality. Sometimes you can feel imposter syndrome due to coloniality within your own society, within your own country. So when people with lived experience like you feel like imposters, what do you think the system is actually communicating to them?
I believe the system is communicating to them first that you are imposters to begin with, and then when they react or they act as imposters, then it will be the system communicating to them you are underqualified, you are inexperienced, and that you are less. That's how it goes in the most cases.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, especially, sharing your background with some of the work that you were doing, especially the human rights work, had real like consequences like being arrested or detained. What do you wish humanitarian spaces understood about imposter syndrome as a structural condition, not necessarily a personal problem that you just have to deal with?
I think the first step is that for people to acknowledge or to know that they are being treating other people in a way that make them feel less or not belonging or not qualified. That's a good start because some people they have been inherited the way they treat people from their ancestors or from previous supervisors or from how the policies were written. They don't question how this dynamic working and how it's impacting everyone. And the second thing is that if the point of doing the work is elevating suffering among people who are in precarious situations, and if the aim is to make people safe, if the aim is to help people, to empower them for the sake of having these missions succeeded, people have to be treated the same way and address the feeling of competition. or displacement. Displacement in the sense that, like, if these people who I'm treating as less than me, if they become in a place of acknowledgement and authority, they will move me from my place, and thus I will be at risk. So that's not how it is. If the aim is to do the things I mentioned earlier, then it's a collective effort, is a collective solidarity and understanding of each other, and everyone brings strengths, and everyone has areas to work on. So I would say that.
No, I couldn't have said it better myself. I guess before we end today with this episode, do you have any advice for others who feel like, they also have maybe similar lived experiences, but they feel like they don't fit in this space and they'll never be able to contribute to humanitarian missions?
I would say that now with the world, like every day, and day by day, there is a big number of movement. Is getting bigger and bigger, and displacement. And in particular, that's my country, Sudan, is under war, and that means a lot of more people are being displaced within Sudan and outside Sudan. And we have people, I have people, or I know people being displaced in neighboring countries, and also to other third countries like Europe, Canada, and the US, and maybe some countries in Asia. Definitely, there will be like more challenge and more struggle. So the first advice would be that you be a good example of your ethics and principles, and also second piece of advice is being confident and be humble. Another advice would be that for people to know their worth and to know what they are really good at and what they really need to be better at in a way that's really neutral, not because of competition or because of lack of knowledge. And the last advice I would give is to have people who share the same background, whether it's refugees and migrants, or people who are from certain nationalities, or people from different gender identities and sexual orientations, to come together, because the solidarity among people who have a shared experience, it could be a way of empowering, and it helps a lot in overcoming feelings and experiences like feeling as imposters, or at the same time feeling less or feeling oppressed, marginalized.
Oh, that's really well said. I noted your main advice is you need ethics, confidence, and to be humble. And that is a really nice takeaway if you're interested in working in this field. Well, thank you, Kapi, so much for speaking with me about your background and honestly such sensitive topics. It was a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Leila, for the invitation, and for the great idea to make change.
In this episode, Mohammed reminds us that imposter syndrome is often a rational response to exclusion, not a personal failing to overcome. In part two, we continue the conversation by shifting from critique to practice, focusing on Mohammed's work in psychosocial support and refugee services, and what dignified, community led care can look like in humanitarian spaces. And that's it for today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about today's conversation, visit theimposters.org, where you can explore episode resources and browse the wider archive of lived experience experts. Tune in to The Imposters wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm Lila Raouf. Thanks so much for listening.